Wow, everybody was right on time for that. I was about to say a minute to go for the meeting, and all of a sudden it just tones down in here. So perfect. Thank you. But then after that, we get the longest minute of our life as we all quietly stare at each other. It's Valentine's Day, so my wife sent me to an assembly meeting as opposed to having to deal with me. Well, good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock, so I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional First People of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Present.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Ms. Duncan,
Here.
Mr. Yestad,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
and Ms. Carlson.
Here.
Are there any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? It'll bring us to ceremonial matters. Tonight we have several ceremonial matters. We'll start first with a proclamation for the library. I will read the proclamation, and then I understand the Honorable Jeff Budd is here to accept the award. And the other honorable librarian as well to accept the award on behalf of the library. So thank you both for being here. A proclamation, the 100th anniversary of the City and Borough of Sitka's Public Library. Whereas in March of 1923, the first iteration of the Sitka Public Library, located in the Russian schoolhouse, opened its doors. And whereas the Sitka Public Library has now served the community for 100 years, and generations of dedicated staff, patrons, and volunteers intend the institution to serve well into the future. And whereas libraries enable individuals to make informed decisions about their self-governance and provide entry into important research about health, economics, housing, the environment, and more by promoting unrestricted access to information to help people lead more productive and fulfilling lives. And whereas the Library of the Future will increasingly be a hub for accessing knowledge via hyperconnectivity, and will strive to partner with more organizations, engage with new audiences, and continue to ensure the library serves as a community center for lifelong learning and connection, and is accessible and welcoming to all people. And whereas in a world undergoing constant change, libraries provide enduring connections to the past, present, and future of our communities, nations, and civilizations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka does hereby proclaim and celebrate the Sitka Public Library a place of stories for all. Be it further resolved as the mayor of the City and Borough of Sitka that I hereby affirm the 100th anniversary of the City and Borough of Sitka's Public Library, signed and sealed today by myself. Congratulations to the library for 100 years, and here's to another 100, because we'll all be here to see that as well. Well, thank you both for the service to the library. You're welcome to say the words if you like.
On behalf of the Sitka Public Library and the Library Commission and the Friends of the Sitka Public Library. I'd like to thank the Assembly and the Mayor for acknowledging the important role that the library takes in our community and an important role that the libraries take in communities across this great nation. When a library turns 100 years old, it is quite the reason to celebrate, and the library has a grand celebration planned for April 1st, and I hope the community comes out to celebrate with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And then tonight we do have two service awards. I will read the service awards, and then if both the individuals could join me up front, that would be most appreciated. Starting with the service award on behalf of the City and Borough of Sitka is hereby awarded to Jerry Christner with this expression of grateful acknowledgement for your 9 years of valued service rendered in the public interest while serving on the investment committee. Thank you. 9 years is quite the time of service, and we look forward to continuing the goals of the investment committee, especially in regards to some of the debt policy that you guys have been looking at. So thank you for your time on there. I don't know if we'll be able to fill a 9-year vacuum, but we'll certainly try. And a service award on behalf of the City and Borough of Sitka is hereby awarded to Douglas Osborne. This expression of grateful acknowledgement for your almost 8 years of valued service rendered in the public interest while serving on the Health Needs and Human Services Commission. Thank you. And Douglas, Doug, it's always funny to see proper names on forms like that. I don't know that I've known a Health Needs and Human Services Commission without you. So that'll be most definitely different. If I remember correctly, I think most of your times were as chair of that. So again, it's hard to fill in 8 years of vacuum, but for both of you, I understand, eventually family and life calls as well, but thank you both for your time in service to the City and Borough of Sitka. Picture moments. And that'll bring us to special reports. Tonight we have a scheduled special report with our auditor. Is Joy on the line, Sarah? Hello, Joy. Good to see you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, and all of you on the Assembly. It's nice to see you as well. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yes, thank you.
That's great.
So I'll just turn it straight over to you to go over our audit and the results of. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Let me attempt to share my screen here, and let me know if and when you can see that on your end, and I'll make it a little bigger on my side so I can see what you're seeing on your screen as well.
And we do have a presentation in front of us now.
Great. And this is actually the Assembly packet. Your team does a great job of getting this all combined for you. So I'm going to try to follow along in your Assembly packet to make it easier for you to follow along as well. So this is under the tab for 23017, our special report. And, for those of you I've not met yet, it's nice to meet you. My name's Joy Mariner, and I serve as the audit partner on the audit for the City and Borough of Sitka. I work pretty closely with Melissa and her team. They do an excellent job getting through what have been, I would say, since Melissa's term started as finance director, pretty crazy few years in the role in accounting in public governments. And so I just want to start off by saying nothing in here that is a significant concern. The audit was big as usual and unusual as usual, it seems, but nothing in here that is a really big red flag that I think you as the assembly need to be involved in remediating. You do have 4 attachments here. One is this page. One is the annual comprehensive financial report, which is your actual financial statement. And then you have your single audit report and your audit wrap up. I'm actually going to just start with the audit wrap up, which is in your packet and this tab. Hopefully you can sort of see what I'm doing along here and follow along. The audit wrap up is really, our required communication to you as the assembly. The financial statements are your team and your management team's financials. They're based on, you draft them. Actually, you're one of the only in the state that draft their own financial statements. You draft those and you are responsible for those. We come in and we audit them. We double check them. We test samples. We perform all sorts of procedures to feel comfortable with the information in them. But we are accountable to you, and we want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the audit process and that we've reported to you anything we think is a significant area that you need to be aware of. So that's what the wrap up is intended to do. I'm going to skip to, I know you don't want me here for an hour and a half on Valentine's, so I'm going to skip to what matters in here and highlight a few things. I'm not there in person for you to raise your hand, but Mr. Mayor, I'd ask for you to just interrupt me if there's something that somebody wants to say, and I'm happy to be answering questions along the way. Does that work for everybody?
Yep, thank you.
Great. So the big things here, we issued unmodified opinions on the financial statements. We also issued unmodified opinions on your federal and state of Alaska single audit reports, which means that we did not find any material non-compliance with your federal and state awards that were audited. And I have a note here that your team's cooperation was excellent as usual. We go down there with a whole team of people. We eat a lot of pizza and chicken wings and look at a whole lot of documentation. I think just this year with all of the federal single audits, the samples were almost 200 in terms of payroll and non-payroll, some of those other areas. So your team did a great job of helping us get through all of the volume. One big thing this year, and I've talked about it for the last few years, is I'll make this a little bigger. You did adopt GASB 87, which is a new standard that requires you to record your leases. And you have 2 kinds of leases. You lease to others, like at the airport or at some of your enterprise funds. And then you also lease from others. And so you have now a new lease receivable and a new lease payable that were not on the books and records last year. And your team spent a lot of time and effort. Actually, this went back several years where there are a lot of leases there at the borough. So I just want to highlight that because it's a really big standard. It actually just took a lot longer at all of our clients than any of us anticipated. But your team did a great job of getting all that documentation together and answering our questions on that. Inherent in that is an estimate. And I bring that up because the new lease standard requires you to essentially use a discount rate to calculate, almost like you would do for a debt agreement, a discount rate for the calculation of those lease receivables and payables. So that's a new estimate this year. Some of your books, your numbers are not hard and fast dollars like you would see in, say, a bank statement. A dollar is a dollar, but you do have some level of allowance for uncollectible accounts, although most of yours are very collectible. Your community is good about paying their bills. You have an estimate related to your pension liability and an estimate related to your landfill closure and post-closure obligations. Another estimate that's really not any different is your depreciation. So your assets are depreciated over an estimated useful life, but no changes there. One thing I will just kind of highlight for you, we can look at a couple of significant areas of the audit that we focused on. You did sell your hospital property this year, so we looked at the proceeds from that and the accounting for that. Also, you recognize some of the ARPA funding or the ARPA funding as lost revenue this year. And you fell below the threshold where the federal government required a lot of reporting around that. And I think that's a really wise course of action that you as an assembly chose to take. And then we did audit 3 federal major programs. Most years in the past, before before 2020 in the old world order. We usually only just had one major program, but it seems there's a lot going on. So we did audit the ARPA money, the airport improvement money, and this is a COPS grant that got some additional funding this year, your community policing grant. So those are the three programs that we were required to audit for 2022's audit. There was one adjustment that we identified, $257,000 for the Harbor Fund. And this is related to the new Crescent Harbor asset. It was actually placed in the books last year, and it was over depreciated last year. It's not what I would consider to be a material adjustment, but it was corrected this year when we found it during the audit this year. The reason it didn't flag was because it was a new asset, and this year it actually showed up as having, you know, a full year's worth of depreciation, but it was actually not matching the depreciation that was recorded last year. So that correction was run through the current year and was recorded into 2022. So it should not be an issue going forward. And again, with that one, not material. We didn't report it as a finding or anything like that. It was really an adjustment that had to do with just the new asset coming online last year. The only other things I'll just kind of highlight in here is we do look at your internal controls. We are not doing a control audit per se, but as part of our audit procedures, we're required to understand your controls and evaluate them. And all controls are those checks and balances that make sure that your financial statements are correct. So whether it's reviewing a timesheet or performing a bank reconciliation, on the compliance side, it's looking at the reports before they get filed, or having somebody approve an invoice or a contract before it's entered into. Policies are pretty important here. And we would report to, actually, it has to be recorded on your single audit, reported all the way through to the White House. If we have something that's a significant deficiency or a material weakness, those are things we think you as the assembly need to step into. Things that we believe that merit your attention. And we didn't identify any findings this year or areas where we feel that you need to step in and change policy. That doesn't mean that there's always, there's always room for improvement in controls. And it's something that Melissa does a great job of calling us throughout the year where there are questions or concerns. But I think that's, from my perspective, internal controls are operating well and they're designed well to run the city government. There were two areas that we did identify as just things that you should be aware of, that management's aware of. The first has to do with administrative access to your IT system. Right now is very common in Alaska. You don't necessarily want to hire 3 new accounting staff to address this, but both your finance director and controller, who do an excellent job, both have admin level access in your system. And then we did identify 2 former employees that still had active accounts. No evidence they ever accessed them, but had not been shut off. So those are just recommendations from our side to consider changing some procedures there for this, what we call super user or admin access. Really, there's already good controls in place that are kind of those audit trail reportings, that back-end monitoring. And when we look at controls, preventive controls are stronger, detective controls are very powerful. Right now, because of the size of your accounting department, you don't have a preventive control because those users are high-level admin access, but you do have detective controls that are very powerful to prevent any kind of what we call management override from occurring. So on the 2 former employees, it'd be good if those were, kind of shored up, and I know they're already changing some policies there. But on the admin side, it's a little bit of a risk assessment there, and whether or not you want to spend the money on that is kind of dependent on your budgets. And then on the depreciation side, when new capital assets are coming on, this wasn't a material adjustment, but our recommendation is just somebody reviews those new assets, and even all the way up to the project management side. Hey, does this make sense from the enterprise side, the amount that was recorded? So that's really it on the audit wrap up. We have other items we would tell you about if we found fraud or abuse, or if we had significant difficulties or disagreements. Nothing like that this year. Went really well. I do have a couple of highlights on the financial statements I wanted to walk through with you, but I'll stop there and ask if there's questions before we proceed to look at the financial statements themselves.
Yeah, we have one question here.
Hi, Joy. It's John Leach. I noted this section about the GASB 87 requirement. I'm hearing that there's a new additional requirement coming forward in the next year or so that we have to account for subscription services. Do you know anything about that, or am I getting too far ahead of things right now?
You're not wrong on that. A lot of your subscriptions are likely scoped out, and so you're definitely ahead of the curve in asking questions about that one. And I think there's actually another one that might even impact you even more with interest capitalization next year. That anytime you're kind of looking at capital projects, that's something to monitor. But great point, and something that we should definitely be looking at. There's actually a whole section of your ACFR, which is rather large, your ACFR is. But if you actually turn to, let me just back up to that page. There is a page in the financials that tell you what the upcoming pronouncements are. And I'll just get myself through this 500-page document here. On your PDF, it's page 114 of the PDF. Where you can see this year you adopted GASB 87. That's really the only one that had any significant impact this year. And then coming up, you have conduit debt obligations. This is impacting a lot of our cities who issue conduit debt for nonprofits in their area. LIBOR's going away, so there's a new standard around how to account for any debt agreements you have that are at LIBOR. I don't believe you have any. Public-private partnerships is a big one. This is a GASB 94. I don't think you have any formal public-private partnerships, but if you're considering doing any P3s going forward, it's something that's kind of a happy trend that people want to do these. They sound nice. Consultants are really pushing them, but the accounting for them can be very complex and expensive. So that might be something that you would watch out for as the assembly, just to make sure if you're pushing for one of these agreements, you understand the back end implications to your accounting team, and the reporting for those payment arrangements can be complex. And then this is the one you were talking about, John. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it is, it's kind of coming up this year, GASB 96. So it's basically more information on how you account for technology arrangements. And it's basically where you've got a right of use subscription asset. Most of the time, I would say a lot of our clients aren't meeting the thresholds for this, but it may impact you with specifically your accounting software, or actually what we're seeing is where you've got utilities that's SCADA, and some of the SCADA systems are actually subscription based. And so it just kind of depends on how those systems are designed and set up. But it's very similar to GASB 87, where you book kind of an asset, a right of use asset, and a liability, almost like a lease. So if you have a commitment to, subscribe to this, asset, or to use this service, that you would also then record the liability for the life of that agreement. So if you have a 10-year agreement to use the software, you would, in theory, and there's not kind of a way out, you would in theory record it. So excellent point. Thanks for bringing it up. It's definitely something to watch out for.
Thank you. And that looks like it at this time.
Okay. Well, we've already made it to page 78 of the financials, but I'm going to back up just a little bit and just highlight a few things. And I'm attempting to get through, get to the right spot. So your financial statements, really the main thing I want to do is kind of cover for you and highlight what you have in here. And I do this very briefly every year, just so you are aware of all the information in your ACFR. The introductory section has, a letter of transmittal that describes a little bit more about your local government. It's a great tool when you're going to national conferences and people are asking you more statistical information, or just kind of general overview. It's a really good tool for that. You also did receive the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting last year, and that's that certificate is included. There's all of their elected officials on here and an org chart. The financial section is what we really focus on. So it starts with our independent auditor's report, and I mentioned we had an unmodified opinion on that. And then management's discussion and analysis, which almost reads like an annual report. It gives you a 3-year history of specific balances, things that are really important to know about, and the changes, what really happened this year. So I'd really encourage you to read through the MD&A because it gives you a little bit more color. If you're trying to figure out, where are we at with this compared to last year, the MD&A does a great job of describing that. And then your basic financial statements include kind of roll-ups for your types of funds and then your government-wide statements, as well as these notes that you saw the very last note, the notes to the basic financial statements. You're also required to disclose a lot of pension information. So that's what this section is, all this pension information about your PERS and OPEB plans. And then here under the supplementary information, this is just additional information. It's required to get that certificate of excellence, but it's definitely not required to be disclosed for the financial statements. I will say these are things that these statements are available for long term. Usually people are keeping them for 30 to 50 years. And so you want to have this detail. You want to know what really happened in some of your non-major or smaller funds. And then lastly, but I think probably most interesting to you, is the statistical section. So you can use this as a reference if you want to look at our history, it's 10-year history of say property tax rates or your principal property taxpayers. Really good information in here for you as assembly members. Again, not part of the required basic financial statements, but are required in order to receive that certificate of excellence. So I'll highlight a couple of quick things for you on the statements themselves, just so you're familiar with it. I'm going to go buzz past the MD&A and the auditor's report and just touch briefly on a few things here. This is your statement of net position, and I'm on page 57 now of your packet. And the statement of net position just tells you on a snapshot on one day on June 30th what you had in assets. Assets are things you own, liabilities, things you owe to others. And then what's left over is called net position. So assets, not surprisingly, majority of your assets are held up in capital assets. So between both your enterprise or what we call business type activities and governmental funds, you've got $440 million of capital assets. You also do have quite a lot in your reserves for in your central treasury and cash equivalents and some of these other restricted cash and investments here. On the liability side, if we keep moving to the next page, your biggest liabilities are related to your bonds and your notes payable, as well as your pension liability, which you can't do anything about. So you have total bonds outstanding of 173, total pension liabilities of 14.6 million. Other liabilities are things you owe to vendors at the end of the year, your employees at the end of the year, mostly related to the timing of payments and when you make them. And then you can see here, there's a new line here for leases payable. You don't owe a lot of money on leases. You're actually very little on leases payable. But if I back up, I forgot to point it out. You have a new leases receivable line this year here. Your leases receivable is actually 5.7 million. So much bigger on the receivable side. You lease more to others than you lease from others. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on there. And then the other thing I'll kind of touch on here is your net position. This is your governmental funds. These are your enterprise funds or business type activities. Net position is what you have in equity, and it's something that's really important to watch. Most of your kind of net position number is tied up in capital assets. You have 274.6 million tied up in capital assets. Besides the hospital sale, which is not an everyday thing, you can't turn around and sell most of your assets. You're sitting in one of them. It's hard to turn around and sell it tomorrow. Plus you use it. And this includes things like your utility assets and your admin building and cars and computer items and all sorts of things included there. Some of your net position is restricted. You can't spend it for certain reasons. Maybe there's legal restrictions on the money, or the voters have required you to save it for certain things like the permanent fund. And then you do have your unrestricted net position. And this is kind of spread across all the funds. And I will just say you do need some level of net position in order to pay for your working capital, your bills to plan for the future. And I'm going to touch on one more page before we finish for questions, because if we look at that on more of a fund level, and I'm looking specifically on page 61 for the general fund. The general fund balance, if you look at this at the end of the year, is at $6.5 million in that unassigned or kind of unrestricted category. You do have some that's committed as well, and that's just really limited by the assembly itself. But 6.5 million in unassigned. And if you compare that to total expenses in the general fund, 26 million. So you don't have a lot. Even if you add those together and you've got 16 million, you only just have about 7 million between committed and available, kind of this number here, unassigned fund balance. And so, I wouldn't say that your general fund is over capitalized in a sense that the fund balance is too high. We certainly have seen over the last few years the fluctuations and the uncertainty. So if you take that $6 million, you're really only at kind of a 3-month window. If you're looking at the full 16, 17 million, more like 7 months worth of expenses. So it's something to just kind of be talking about and be aware of. And certainly I look at that over time to make sure that the general fund is still in a sustainable position. Overall, the general fund did show a negative change in fund balance for the year of 1.2 million. But most of that was because you were transferring money out. You were transferring money out to your various different funds for various different things, capital projects type of things, paying debt service on your debt. So there's a lot of good reasons why those transfers were made, and you have a lot of control over those transfers. So just overall, the general fund revenues less expenditures were in the positive by 5.5 million, but you then transferred a significant amount of money to the other funds, which from our testing appeared to be budgeted and appropriate, just something to continue to monitor. And then, from my perspective, I think it's always helpful to look at your proprietary funds, what we call enterprise funds. This is your electric fund, solid wastewater harbor. And, when you look at here and what you've got in kind of net position available for these guys and unrestricted, they tell a little bit of an inconsistent story. Some of the funds are more healthy, I would say. Some of them are actually solid waste is in a deficit position at the end of the year in your unrestricted. So it's something to just continue to monitor and make sure that your rates are supporting the expenditures that you're having to spend on these funds. Overall, when you look at income loss from operation, the harbor is the only fund that is posting a loss, but keep in mind that depreciation is a huge amount of that, the reason for that. And depreciation at the harbor, a lot of the harbor was paid for with state or federal monies. So you wouldn't want the people using the harbor to pay for the full cost of the harbor itself, given that it was already paid for with a grant. But when you're looking at replacement, there's not as much certainty in the future about how much of those replacement costs will be able to be funded. The harbor also gets this raw fish tax, which can fluctuate from year to year. So overall, the harbor does show an income for the year before transfers came out. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you, and I know you look at financials all the time, so you probably don't want to look at too many more numbers with me, but I'll just pause there for questions, or if there's anything that as you were reading through the packet you wanted to discuss with me, I'm happy to go through those.
Yeah,
I know the answer to this question, but I have to do a shout out to Stan Fuller, who was mayor when I was very first on the assembly 25 years ago, or almost 25 years ago. I can't believe that. And every time we did this, Stan unfortunately had to ask the question as, can we balance the checkbook? And I know the answer to that, but I think it bears saying that there was a point in time where the answer to that was no. And so I want to applaud our staff for being able to have an audit like this. You feel free to answer if you like, but I know the answer already to that question.
Yeah, we do look pretty carefully at cash flow modeling. And one of the things that I appreciate about your team is that they seem very much wanting to limit the timing of your debt, to limit the amount of interest that you have to pay, and really going only after kind of, you know, obligations that make sense. I didn't see any issues with cash flow throughout the year, and no borrowing from, worst case scenario, you run out of cash. But a bad scenario is you're borrowing money from a fund that has money in order to make payments from a different fund, right? So you have to try to get your grant reimbursements done quickly. You don't want one fund to be completely underwater so that they're still, not stealing, borrowing money. You're not dealing with what we're seeing in a lot of cities where they've got a lot of interfund loans where this fund is really not making it. And so they're having to borrow money every year to essentially supplement that. And it does seem to be well managed, even at the individual fund level, not only at, if you look kind of government wide.
Well, thank you, Joy. I think we understand 500 pages all now because there are no more questions. But no, we do appreciate the services of you and your company. It's always good to see you hold up in the conference room for 2 weeks, I think it is. Because I know at the end of the day, I'm comfortable and confident that we are going to get an audit like this, where maybe one number has to shift a column, but there are no significant findings, and that's a huge hats off to our financial team here. And I do appreciate their work on it. Appreciate your work on it. And if we have any questions as this process goes forward, we know where to reach out and find you. So appreciate your time this evening.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. And again, reiterate, just a shout out to your team there. We always make sure they feel audited, and they're always very gracious with our requests. So thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So moving along tonight in our special reports, is there anyone here for government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? I understand we may have one from sustainability brief this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Assembly members. My name is Bree Gable, and I am your Sustainability Coordinator. In this new position, I lead efforts to organize, facilitate, and implement sustainability goals for the City and Borough of Sitka. I started in September 2022 alongside the creation of the Sustainability Commission. Through these two actions, the city has demonstrated its proactive approach to ecological, economic, and social challenges. By utilizing my expertise in climate action, governance and policy, and public engagement, I intend to promote positive, sustainable change throughout our community. So far, in the brief 6 months that I have been here, much of my time has been spent learning city process, staying up to date on funding opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and representing Sitka at the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor Initiative. In addition to these duties, I have had the pleasure of serving as the staff liaison for the Sustainability Commission. The next meeting is March 7th at 6 p.m. right here in this room, during which commissioners will be finalizing their priorities for their 2023-2024 work plan, which is anticipated to be presented to you for approval in March. The commission has undertaken an extensive planning process to help them align their work with existing city processes and ensure that their annual work plan supports the ambitious goals listed in its establishing ordinance. Part of this planning process includes feedback on potential projects from commissioners, city staff, and the public. Currently, public input is being sought through a brief 3-minute survey that can be found on the Sustainability Commission's page on the city's website. The survey is open until February 28th. More information on projects proposed by commissioners and city staff can be found in the February meeting packet, also on the same website. The hard work of the commission over the last 4 months really shows. I look forward to continuing to shape this new role to fit Sitka's unique sustainability needs. I would like to thank you, the Assembly, for your support, as well as the overwhelming support I have received from city staff and the community. If you would like to learn more about sustainability or just want to get to know me better, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Welcome, but it seems like welcome is, a little 6 months is a little long for that. But glad to have someone in that role. And it sounds like the role is going extremely well for not only yourself, but for city staff and the community as well. So we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding that.
Yeah.
Please, I just wanted to just take a moment to shout out to Bree as well. I'm the liaison for the Sustainability Commission, and I've also met with her before that as it was being formed, and I'm just very impressed by her knowledge base and her ability to help lead and grow the Sustainability Commission. And I think she's got a wealth of information or expertise and a really good way about her. I think we're fortunate to have her.
Anyone else here from municipal departments this evening? Anyone from the school district? And then students and guests. Great. So that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening. I am Doug Osborne, formerly of the Health Needs and Human Services Commission.
And my name is Courtney MacArthur. We are 2 of the 11 board members of the Sitka Homeless Coalition. We wanted to give a brief update tonight and a big thank you to the Assembly and the community for the support of the Hitkisani Cabin Community Project.
So 3 things on the update. First, our operating plan was completed by a professional development company, and it outlines how we could make this Housing First project work in the short term and in the long term. And then the second big one in December, Senator Murkowski's office contacted and said the $1 million THUD grant that she had advocated for and shepherded through the process, that came through, and that was going to be coming to Sitka for the cabins in 2023. Senator Murkowski originally sent 54 projects from Alaska, and the subcommittee in the summer only approved 19, and the project here in Sitka was one of them. So we have $1 million that will be coming, and that's just for construction of these 12 by 14 cabins up on Jarvis Street. And then the other big one, on January 24th, our new full-time executive director went to Juneau and met with the Alaska Mental Health Trust, and they voted unanimously to do a long-term lease with the Sitka Homeless Coalition. So it's a 17-acre parcel, and they're leasing it for $325 a month, which is very doable with the plan of building these structures. And then there's also a community room, which would provide some shared space, and also if there was overflow. So those are the big 3 things. We have a plan, we have the $1 million from Murkowski, and then we have this Alaska Mental Health Trust. And one quick thing to end on the Juneau, when our director went over, they had taken public comment. You probably saw in the Sentinel, it said public comment for this maybe 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it. And they said all the comments they got from Sitka were either positive or neutral. They didn't get a single negative comment about building these structures for homeless people at the top of Jarvis Street. So a lot of community support, and that's a good segue for Courtney, who has a lot of people to thank.
Yeah, so finally, a big thank you first to the City Assembly for awarding a $15,000 grant to Sitka Homeless Coalition last fall. And secondly, to all of the organizations that have supported this initiative, especially our cabin sponsors, including First Bank, the Rotary Club, Moose Lodge, and STA Social Services. And finally, to the hundreds, literally hundreds of Sitkans who contributed their time, their talent, their money to make this community goal a reality. So in December, the 2nd annual Shelter Sitka fundraiser had a goal of raising $25,000 leading up into the new year. And thanks to people's generosity, we exceeded that goal and raised over $40,000. So with this level of support, there is no doubt we can do this together. And if you'd like to get involved, you can join us on Zoom Fridays at 10 a.m. And I think that's it. So good as sheesh. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Anyone else for persons to be heard?
Well, good evening. My name is Richard Ween. I don't have much to say, only 3 minutes worth. And one important thing that I'd like to bring out is to specifically acknowledge Melissa Haley for her work. If you notice, that was said that Sitka is one of the few that actually does their own kind of financial statement and then BDO audits it. So I think that is something that is quite outstanding. One important number that you have to deal with, and it's a fixed cost. And when things change, that fixed cost can become better or worse. And that number is $194 million of bonds and notes. And those are things that are very important. And I think that when you go through an audit like that, these are the issues that you need to pay attention to. And it'll be interesting tonight as we add to that debt. Anyway, everybody, happy St. Valentine's Day. NPR highlighted this morning the brutal beginnings of St. Valentine's Day, but I think today we kind of celebrate with potentially candlelight dinners and roses, preferably red. President Snow has cast aspersion over white roses, though they're very pretty as well. But February is a very busy month. We have February 11th, which acknowledges Bernadette Soubirous for her activities at Massabrielle in France. And if you don't know who she is, take a look. On the 12th, we have Abraham Lincoln. And does anybody remember Abe? But he's an interesting chap, as well as on the 16th, we have Elizabeth Peratrovich Day, our very own, and Washington's birthday is on the 22nd. So we have the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, you know, a lot of canceled people. So anyway, happy St. Valentine's Day. One of the important things I want to bring up is that the CDC has added to the childhood vaccine schedule. They added the messenger RNA vaccine. And I think that people need to be aware of that because that's from 6 months old to whenever. Various countries around the world who know less than we do have stopped giving these things for people under 50 or under 12. But the important thing is that these are the things that go under the radar. And you need, as parents, to know that something like this may happen, and you need to participate in a proactive way on whether you want to get it or not.
Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? The button on the very bottom and the microphone will turn red. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Harvey Brandt. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Borough Assembly and city employees for their service. It's appreciated. I speak tonight in favor of a quality marine highway system. The legislature of the new state of Alaska in 1959 had two serious requirements, two serious goals. One was regs, Department of Fish and Game, to professionally run our fisheries. And the second was a marine transportation system. 4 years later, in 1963, the Taku, the Malaspina, and the Matanuska set sail. And it was impressive. On our honeymoon, we sailed on several of those vessels in 1966. It is now a mess. The ferry system is a serious mess. You can't depend on the schedule. You can't depend on maintenance and so on. Senator Murkowski and others have figured out a way, bipartisan-like, to come up with nearly $300 million to the state of Alaska. But the state of Alaska has to match it with another 100 million. And I would ask that you folks sponsor a resolution. Doesn't take much time to write it or do it, but it makes a little bit of noise stating your support for this 100 million from the state of Alaska. I'd ask that you please do that. Thank you so much.
And anyone else for persons to be heard off of tonight's agenda? Seeing none, that'll bring us to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A, approve the January 24th and February 2nd assembly meeting minutes. B, approve a liquor license transfer application submitted by Alejandro Vasquez and liquor license renewal applications for one C Ventures Incorporated DBA Cascade Convenience Center at 1211A Sawmill Creek Road and Watson Point Liquors at 1867 Halibut Point Road. 2, Pizza Express at 1321 Sawmill Creek Road, Suites E through I. And 3, House of Liquors Incorporated DBA Salty Saul's Liquor Cabinet at 321B Lincoln Street. And finally, C, approve resolution 2023-06 on first and final reading, adopting an alternative allocation method for the FY23 Shared Fisheries Business Tax Program and certifying that this allocation method fairly represents the distribution of significant effects of fisheries business activity in FMA 18 Central Southeast area.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. I do read all of the data that's presented online from the city concerning the assembly. And even reading the old minutes is something that's very important. A lot of people don't attend. But in one single glance, you can kind of understand what happened at a meeting. So I'd like to call attention to February 2nd meeting and how that came about, and please review it for your own knowledge, because there are $1.6 million in appropriations during that meeting, and it's interesting to see where all the appropriations went. And if you don't attend meetings or you don't read them, please do, because it's important to be an informed citizen. Thank you.
Is there any other comment on the consent agenda? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items A, B, and C, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Mr. Yestad.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
We'll bring us to board, commission, committee appointments. Item D, please.
I move to approve Catherine Prussian to an unexpired term on the Parks and Recreation Committee and Diane Brady Howard to an unexpired term on the Historic Preservation Commission as the Sitka Tribe of Alaska representative.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint those two individuals to respected committees. Is there any public comment?
Seems like tonight we've been doing a lot of shout outs, but
If you could state your name for the record,
I'm
please.
sorry, Richard Ween. This has to do with Kathleen Prussian and Dion Brady Howard. I think that they are stepping up for unexpired terms, and I think that those individuals need to be recognized and thanked explicitly and multiply for doing that. And so it's much appreciated. Both of them bring experience and knowledge, and I certainly know that they will perform well. And again, it's appreciated. Thank you, Ms. Prussian and Ms. Brady Howard.
there any other public comments on the appointments? Assembly deliberation? Crystal?
Start off by saying both are well versed in ways that would contribute to these respective commissions that they're applying for. So we're always grateful for people who are willing to serve. Wanted to include Ganeshish to Bob Sam, who was previously the STA rep on the Historic Preservation Commission. And then I just had one question. I think it's directed towards Sarah. In looking at the roster specifically for Catherine's appointment, 2 unexpired terms. I'm just wondering, those aren't staggered. Her term would basically begin upon approval. And the reason I ask that is it looks like 5 members would currently expire in 2025. So I was just curious.
I'd have to go back and take some time to research it. But you are correct. Actually, there's 3. How
Are
many
the
did you
2
say?
that are vacant?
Yes,
Those are unexpired terms. So are those on a staggered or if
if
you
they
appoint?
apply, then it would be the 3-year.
Okay.
It
So
would be a
also
3-year term.
2025.
Well, so it'd be 2026
Okay.
if they
gotcha.
were appointed this year.
Okay. And then, yeah, I think that was my biggest concern because I'm hypersensitive in that we're having quorum issues with the commissions that I'm sitting on. So I was looking at the start date. And so I appreciate that clarification.
Appreciate the insight as well, because I'd hate to have a month where 75% of a commission is no longer serving on the commission and what we could potentially do to alleviate that. So good looking out for the future. Any other comments on the appointments? Sarah, on the appointment?
Okay, on the motion to appoint KK Prussian and Dion Brady Howard. Motion shaker, Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Bring us to item E, please.
I move to reappoint Joel Hansen to a 3-year term on the Local Emergency Planning Committee under Category 6, members of the public, and Lauren Howard to a 2-year term on the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board of Directors, in the category of at-large.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to reappoint those individuals. Is there any public comment?
Richard Ween. One of the things I do is I study patterns. And as you can see, I will always be up here to congratulate and encourage community participation. And these are reappointments to the Local Emergency Planning Commission. And this is Joel Hansen. And to the GPIP, it's Lauren Howard. And so I'd like to thank them for continuing their service to the city. And I will be back when you have other appointments to say thank you.
Any other public comment on the reappointments? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to reappoint Joel Hansen and Lauren Howard, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Mr. Yestad.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item E.
Thank you. That brings us to the top of the hour. So we'll go ahead and take a brief recess. Assembly, please be seated when you're ready to continue. All right, well, thank you, everybody. We will move on to unfinished business item F this evening.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-01 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023 Alaska Controllers Association Legal Defense Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-01. Is there any public comment?
Thank you. I'm Matthew Donahoe for the Alaska Controllers Association. I want to assume in advance that you're going to pass this, and I really, that's tempting fate. I know that that's not something done, but I want to thank you for it. And because of the actions of this assembly, the rest of the region, indeed the state, is supporting us, and you guys led the way on this. Today in the Fisheries Committee in the legislature, they passed unanimously a resolution supporting our position, which is important because we're going to the congressional delegation. We want the support from the governor, and God bless the governor on this, and also the legislature and other communities. Tonight in Wrangell, there is an ask on the table for the first reading of $7,000 and a resolution. And there's another one in Hoonah. So little by little, we're getting all communities, not all, there's a few that, that I don't even know if they have city assembly, and Sitka led the way on this. And I sincerely thank you for it, because this is, I've lived in Southeast Alaska for, I think, 50 years now, roughly. And I don't remember anything like this in that 50 years. We have issues that we generally support, like the ferries, but I don't remember anything like this going to these different communities and getting resolutions. And thank you very much for the leadership this assembly has shown in this. It was really important. You were there when we needed it, and we won't forget. Thank you.
Hi, Jackie Foss, I'm a troller. Matt said probably what all of us are going to say, which is thank you. And thank you to all the gear groups who've shown up for us. We've got the Seiners, we have the Gill Netters. Thank you to the advisory councils, to Fish and Game, who are also supporting us, and to all the communities. And most of all, thanks to the individual fishermen who have been there with us since 2019. And who are with us today. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I know hearing from trollers for 3 separate meetings probably is, I don't know, maybe it's exciting, but I just appreciate your time and your diligence. And thank you very much.
Anyone else for public comment on 23-01?
Richard Wien. I too would like to thank the Assembly for $25,000. In the past, I have felt that that was not enough. Ketchikan, I think, has passed or is about to pass $25,000 grant for this particular cause. And I always had to wonder if the Sitka would have given more, maybe the bar would have been higher and Ketchikan would have potentially given more, but that's neither here nor there. This is something very good that is happening, but you have to analyze this. This has been going on for a long time. There's been a lot of back and forths. It had come to the Assembly previously, and we honored the request for monies for the defense. But the important thing is to look where these lawsuits are coming from. And these are object lessons that need to be taken, and they have to be taken seriously. And hopefully next time we, meaning the community, will be able to jump in a lot sooner and, as they say, nip it in the bud. Right now, this is still out to an administrative judge, and we will see what will happen. Judges sometimes can act in unusual ways, but if they act badly, then I would like to invite the ATA back to ask for more. And so, again, thank you, and carry on.
And Tad Fujioka for the record. I just want to reiterate the appreciation for the support that the Sitka Assembly has shown for this cause, and wanted to thank Matt Donahoe for joining me and several other Sitka trollers and trollers from around Southeast in testifying before the House Fisheries Committee this morning, and your former Assembly member Becca Himshoot sits on that committee, invited me to testify. That was good to see support from folks all around Southeast, and full unanimous support from the committee to pass that resolution on. So thank you very much.
Anything else on ordinance 23-01? Bring it back to the assembly for deliberation. Tor?
Yeah, just real briefly, I think we've a lot's been said about this already. We don't need to repeat everything. Just that, you know, up here in the assembly, we sponsor things or vote on things. It's very rarely unequivocal. I mean, even almost always in the back of your mind, there's a little bit, is this really the right thing to do? And for me, this one is. And it's kind of a nice feeling to know that we really need to do this, and we're getting, I think we are showing some leadership, and this is one that I will not be second guessing myself on. So I appreciate everybody else's comments on this too, and I'll shut up.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just saying what Tor said, and I'm also very grateful for everyone, you know, Matt and everyone else wrangling up support with all the trollers and everyone else. It's not an easy thing to do. Fully support it. And I just kind of something that you said triggered my mind. You said you wouldn't second guess yourself. When we were pushing started this ordinance, a couple times I second guess myself, because I thought, well, why isn't everybody else talking about? Why isn't it so? And it was one Tor talked to me about it, and we looked into it. That was the right thing to do, and we got the facts. The point is, it's a learning lesson, and you know, learning what the right thing to do is. Like, if I get researching your facts, and then if that's the case, go for it. We don't have to wait for, you know, everyone else to be making a big deal out of it. And this is very important. I'm very hopeful that with the support now of the governor, the legislature, all these donations, more of a unified front from Alaska, that you know, it might hopefully impact this in a positive way.
Well, since I wasn't here last time, got quite the lengthy speech to go over on this one. No, I think the first person who votes should vote no, just because Matt said that it was going to pass unanimously, and just to get him a little bit. And then, you know, and I'm not tired of hearing from trollers, but at the end of your speech, I just want to hear what the hot spoon is. That's all I need to know, because then you can come and talk all the time, and then I'll go spend lots of money on gear that doesn't catch me any fish, and then, geez, I'll just be a troller at that point, won't I? The one thing I did want to say on this is that since this process has started, I think everybody from our federal delegation on down to the citizens that showed up to the Elks to support this is now fully aware. And that was not something that happened several weeks ago. It kind of caught me by surprise, the breadth and the depth of this. But now even Senator Sullivan has been sitting in on the briefs just to make sure that the judges are aware that this is being watched, so that they do need to tread cautiously and correctly in their next path. So everybody is aware. At Southeast Conference, there was multiple resolutions submitted, and I think one passed to come from Southeast Conference, as well as everybody who spoke was simply aware of the issue and ready to fight. So I think the state of Alaska is now on strong standing for this, and I think Alaska Trollers Association is going to be a spearhead on this strong fight that we have in front of us. So. Anything else from the Assembly? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-01 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Mayor Eisenbeis.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on second and final reading.
That'll bring us to item G.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-02 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023 Parks and Recreation expenses in the amount of $92,615.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-02. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Ween. When last we saw this at the last meeting, there was some interesting commentary and concerns about this. And I was wondering if we will hear anything tonight about the resolution to some of those concern questions. This is for, I'm not going to go back. I will let members of the Assembly bring up their questions. But the important thing here is this is for $92,000. And what I had previously thought is that this should come not from the general fund, but from the pot tax. It was for student activities. I've heard all kinds of things from the school board about how they're going to figure out how to use it. And it's very unclear, what the path for that is. And now they're talking like $300,000 from the pot tax and so forth. And I think that that is where the money needs to be generated from and not out of the general fund. So that's all I have to say, and I'm anxious to hear what the Assembly has to say about it. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on item 23-02? Assembly deliberation? Well, I can't start this one. I don't have nothing to say on it, so. If there's nothing further, Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-02 on second and final reading, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Second and final reading, item G.
Thank you. Brings us to new business, item H, please.
I move to approve resolution 2023-05 on first and final reading, authorizing the execution of a loan agreement with the Federal Financing Bank guaranteed by the United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Utility Service in the principal amount of $4 million to finance certain previously constructed system extensions and additions to the electric distribution system and facilities of the CBS, authorizing the appropriate officers of the CBS to execute the appropriate documents for the loan and the guarantee, and providing for other matters properly related to hereto.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 23-05. John, could you introduce this item, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Melissa, if you don't mind making your way up here as well, because I'm sure we'll have
We'll
lots. of
probably need her as
questions.
well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
So
I'm on.
I'll try to give a quick, as quick as I can, executive summary. And while Melissa makes her way up here, I do want to let you know we have Rodney Peach also on the line to answer questions. He's with USDA RUS. But very quickly, if you remember back in 2020, we moved forward with a 3-phase maintenance and repair on our Green Lake Hydro facility. We had some estimated costs of about $3 million or so in phase 1 at the time. We had reached out or applied through the USDA loan program, and we had anticipated borrowing $3 million to finish phase 1. At the peak of COVID, rates went way down, and we found out in our budget process, that's how it was passed by the assembly at that point, found out in our budget process that for the same debt service, we could afford, the cost of debt would have been the same to borrow $4 million versus $3 million. So the intent was to use more of that funding to trickle into phase 2 of the project and get some of the items knocked out there as well. Application went through, everything headed off to the DC offices. There were some complications there with, a big backlog of loan applications, as well as the complexities of lending to a municipality. So as these agreements started coming back and forth, they're crossing attorneys' desks, and there were some concerns with governmental powers being taken away from an assembly or a city council. An example being USDA would need to have a say or actually approve or disapprove any rate changes at the utility. And obviously that's something in our charter and our code that belongs to the powers of the assembly. So once that was worked out, here we are a few years later. Rates have gone back up. I think they're at about 3.5% right now. So our cost of debt has changed from when we first applied for this. And we're in a bit of a difficult predicament here. We still need the money for the project, although the first phase is essentially sunk. We've already spent our own funds, correct? We've already spent our own funds out of working capital to make that happen. But we still need to move forward with the rest. We, I would say, strategically put this on hold for a bit, because if you remember, right before the omnibus bill passed, Senator Murkowski approved us for a $10 million direct funding request. Unfortunately, it did not make it into the bill. So now we're right back to the USDA loan option again. Melissa did some work today and looked at the cost of capital if we were to move forward with this loan versus if we borrowed from the municipal bond bank and the rates there, the difference in debt service. And I'd be happy to go over those numbers as the conversation progresses. But I wish I could give you a very clear recommendation from our end on this one, but I think we really need to have a good discussion and figure out what the most appropriate path for Green Lake is right now. But again, Melissa and Rodney are both here to answer further questions if you have them.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. Melissa, I'm going to have an opportunity for public comment, and then I'm sure we'll have you come back up. Thank you. Is there any public comment on resolution 23-05?
Kent Barkow. I think I'm looking at this with an eye to the report from the ETIP and the good work of our electric department, highlighting the fact that our community is on the cusp of exceeding our capacity of our current hydro facilities, and that time is now to start planning for what comes next. And if I was looking at this decision, I'd want to probably the $4 million and the indebtedness that you're going to take on or not take on associated with this decision is what is our plan, our energy plan long-term for building out more capacity. And I think now is the time to start that planning. And quite advantageous time too, as the monies from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Acts are coming to help with renewable energy projects. Anyway, I guess I'm just being supportive of some sort of energy planning that might match up well with the long-term, the electric department's long-term master plan, and include the public in deciding where we want to go and what investments we want to make in more renewable energy as we run out. Because when we exceed our capacity, we make up for what we've with diesel, and we fire up the generators, and that has serious impacts to what our rates will be and how people perceive our efforts at avoiding this problem. So, thank you.
Good evening, Richard Ween. A couple of things with item H, which is the $4 million loan for Green Lake. The interesting thing, it's not about when we exceed the electrical capacity, but why will we exceed it? And for what reasons are we entering into this, which causes us to produce this expenditure? In a very real way, this is like getting your pay stub, and the government takes out a little bit at a time, and you don't really think of it. And if they took it all out at once at the end of the year, you might go, whoa, this is a lot of money I'm giving to the feds. What we see here is, I thought, was a little bit confusing as to where this is going, and it was indicated that that might be true. The bottom line is that we, as Mr. Barkhouse said, we really need to know where we're going. We see here, this is just 4 million for phase 1. And you have to remember, this is just for construction. We've already put our own money in to that in order to get the project going. I think we need to put this into context, and that is, we need a revision. We need to revisit how much this entire project is going to cost, phases 1, 2, 3, and understand the type of hole we're potentially digging here and why. I'm sure there are a lot of good reasons. I remember them from prior discussions of this, but things have changed. And what has changed specifically is that we are pushing Sitka into a particular mode of having to expand our economy here, which at the same time expands our electrical needs. And the question is, I think that this is a time where we really need to see where we're going. The interest rates are up. Do you honestly think the interest rates are going to go down? And so I think the assembly and the administrator need to present the full plan and have us understand where we're going. Otherwise, we're going to have Blue Lake syndrome again, where we come out at $50 million and it ends up at 140 million. So thank you. Is it for me? Okay. But I thought that was my time off, but I will make it my time off. This has to be clarified and brought back again. It's something that we have to consider very seriously and probably very need to do, but you want to know what you're getting into. And I thought the memo was a little dusty. So thank you.
Any other public comment on resolution 23-05? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the assembly. John, I do have a question on this one before the assembly jumps in. And you'd gotten around it, but I never heard the answer. So we started out this process at a $3 million loan rate. Rates went down. For the same debt service, we could borrow $4 million. Rates have gone back up So is that the rates back up to where we were at this $3 million loan? What I'm concerned about is that same amount of debt service and how much can we finance to keep us in that same amount of debt service?
Do you want to help, Melissa? All right. While she comes up, I will say that roughly speaking, we are back up to the same rates, nearly the same rates as we were before the rates came down during COVID. So we're closer to the $3 million range. Is that far off?
No, that's correct. And then.
Or can I make a, I really don't want to interrupt, but there's some things here that I think are important for everybody to understand about the loan.
Yes, Rodney, please go ahead.
So if you take the loan, it's a reimbursement based loan. So basically you guys have expended your own money right now. And if you were to sign and take the full $4 million loan right now as it sits, you don't have to take the full $4 million. You can advance the amount that you want. The note would just be for the full $4 million, but you don't have to use the full $4 million. There could also be a circumstance where we could do some changes within the request to the loan and do an amendment to use any of the additional funds that you don't use now for maybe some different purposes. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that. So the loan is set up as a $4 million loan, but you don't have to use the $4 million. That's just what's available to you. You could advance 2 million or 3 million or 4 million.
Okay, thank you for that, Rodney. However, I think you and I both know if government has a pot of money to spend, we will find a way to spend it. So I think it will be expended if we put it in the bank. So thank you both. That does answer my question on the amount of debt service that we can still cover at this current rate. Other assembly members? Chris?
I actually do have quite a few questions. And I just wrote down my last one, and I think it's actually the most pertinent. What are the consequences of not accepting the loan? As I understand, we've already spent the money for phase 1 and potentially somewhat into phase 2. How much does this hurt the capital fund for this? Can we operate with what is in there, or do we truly need this money to keep moving forward with matching and phase 2 and 3 of this project?
I would answer that by saying that, we have huge capital needs in this fund. Eventually, we are going to have to borrow. It might not be tomorrow. It might not be for this specific project, but not borrowing will certainly make it more difficult to move forward as quickly as we'd like to with the next phases of Green Lake, or it would, bring our capital down and push us into a position where maybe we have enough to cover, the immediate needs for Green Lake, but then we're having to start looking at other borrowing sources for the next project. So, and this is a fund where we're still really working and need to do more work on outlining exactly what that capital plan is. But we know it's big.
I guess the thing I'm still just struggling with is, I'm looking at the amount of interest that we're going to pay over this 30-year term. And it's a lot. And for, I guess, relatively a smaller loan for what our future needs are. And I'm just wondering, and this is a question for this body, is that what we want to do, is pay that amount of interest for something that we have paid for already up front? That's the cost of the loan is where I'm personally struggling. And that's why I wanted to know the consequences of not taking this loan. And I guess maybe one further question is, can we pay this off early? yeah, is there a penalty for 15 years instead of 30, but keeping the terms at 30?
Sure, I'll reach out to Rodney on this one. I believe I read that we can pay it off, but I read a lot of documentation on this one.
Right. So there are different payment structures that you can request when you advance the funds. If you select the 30-year and pay it off earlier, there is a penalty on that because you've locked in that 30-year interest rate for the term of the loan. There are 20-year terms, there are 15 and 10, and the rates vary. Actually, short-term rates are higher than the long-term rates right now. So
I would like to add another piece to this as part of this answer is assuming leaving early payment aside, as I said, Melissa went and talked to the bond bank about other options. If we were to borrow that same amount from the bond bank, the range is anywhere from 4.1% to about 4.65% from the low end to high end. So even on the low end, debt service would cost about $500,000 more with the bond bank, up to about $930,000 more at the bond bank.
one other comment in regards to the question that the gentleman had are the consequences of not taking the loan. Just as a foresight with the IRA funding and future electrical needs, we do have some programs that are going to be available where it's a 50% loan and then 50% like debt forgiveness and some different things that are coming out of the IRA. If you do accept this loan, you'll be within our system. So future opportunities are going to be much more streamlined moving forward. So even if you took this loan and didn't use the funds, you would still have the note available to you. And for future loans, your applications would be easier, so to say.
Chris, you got more? I didn't want to take the floor from you if not.
No, that's it for now.
Okay. Tor?
Yeah, my question, and it might be from the back of the room there. If we don't do this, how does that, we said in the packet that would delay the completions of the phases. And what would that mean in terms of, how much would they be delayed and things like that? What wouldn't be getting done? And so maybe Scott has to answer that.
I think Scott can definitely answer that. One thing I would definitely point out that any delays at this point are making our projects much more expensive. So that's something we really have to keep in mind, that for the rate of inflation for capital projects is much higher than the regular rate. So.
And before Scott jumps in too, another thing is that you have to remember no major maintenance has been done on this facility for 39 years at the time that we were considering this loan and we were putting these phases together. So costs have already gone up. And one of the things that was made it a bit of an emergency for us is we're paying either extremely high insurance premiums or we're not even able to get insurance coverage on the equipment at the facility because of the lack of maintenance.
Nope, good points, John. So again, phase one, just for your recollection, we worked on the water supply portion of the dam. So again, the intake gate controls, the penstock, there was grouting and whatnot. So any of the water conveyance was taken care of initially. Now we're down to essentially we have 2 generators out there that haven't had a tear down or a major unit overhaul since they were put in. So right now they're running well for their age. They have some frequency issues. They have some governor and exciter issues that could probably be taken care of and improved. But it's kind of like any other vehicle or piece of machinery. If you make a choice to delay maintenance, you're running a higher risk. If you repair something while it's still in relatively good condition, you can expect more life out of it. Delaying maintenance on it, probably not our best idea. Our insurance companies are definitely watching, as John stated. There are both advantages and disadvantages to this, and I think this is why we put it out, for full discussion. I can see some good advantage of it. And I don't want to stray off your questions, so I guess I can back off of some of the advantages and disadvantages for now. But I suppose that's the risks we take when we don't do the work that we think needs to be done at this time. We have a less stable. Now, the good thing, just one other portion of that, when we took the water system out of service for the phase one, both units were down in Green Lake, so none of Green Lake could generate. The phase two, phase three, when we take those down, we still have one generator that's going to be capable of running online. And so it's a fairly low system impact. And the sooner that we get those lower system impacts out of the way to where we can operate to full capacity, I think the better we are. Whether that money comes from the USDA or whether it comes from bonds or whether it comes from our capital, that's the decision that we're really asking you to kind of look at. Obviously we can choose to do nothing. Buying down or utilizing all our capital could limit us in some of the grant opportunities that we're really looking forward to, in the electric department. Anytime we can get the federal government to put a certain portion aside, as a 30%, a 50%, or a 70% match, hey, we're doing good. That's money that we're not spending. And so having those capital reserves is definitely in our interest. Any other questions?
Yeah, Kevin.
Thank you, Stephen. I think basically, because this is a pretty big decision, you want to know what we think, and it's time to make that decision regarding this. In my mind, choosing nothing is not to move forward is not an option. We put off all these things for too long, and we don't want to push our luck, so it has to be done. I'm leaning right now towards the side of taking this loan. I think that, yeah, just like you said, and I was already going to say this, any capital we can free up for future matching grants could substantially help us. And I have a feeling, as far as the loan, not being able to pay this one off, I'm sure we have enough loans somewhere else that we could pay those off. Plenty of debt to go around, so we can pay that off early if we get some huge funding. So right now, I'm definitely in support of this. It's not an easy situation, but we got to get it done.
Tim?
Yeah, well, having spent a career in mechanics and maintenance, I can say that either going to spend it now or going to spend a lot more later. So, I think there is no good time to spend money on maintenance except that have done it 10 years ago. So, I really don't want to stretch this out because then you're actually shortening up sort of the recycle on maintenance again. So, spending a little more early or spending the money early makes more sense than stretching this out. And yeah, I think more opportunity is going to come available for grants that, we need to have their capital available for, it sounds like. So I'm in favor of doing maintenance. I think, it's too bad we haven't done it up until now, but, let's spend what we need to now to get it over with so that we can count on this stuff for another 39 years.
So Rodney, another question for you. You indicated that we did not have to pull the entire proceeds of the 4 million. But on the day we execute the loan, does the interest start on the entire amount of the loan, or does it accumulate on the amount that we pulled?
Yeah, so it's only on the amount that you advance.
Okay, perfect. That's actually a much better answer than I thought you were going to give me. So I appreciate that one. And Rodney, this isn't for you. I'm going to go off. Thank you for that answer. It does trouble me a little bit that there's a prepayment penalty. I understand though that the trade-off for a prepayment penalty is a lower interest rate over the course of the loan. So it's either now or later. Because I believe that there is an opportunity for future inclusion in more omnibus bills or anything coming up forward. Now, granted, this is only one phase of multiple phases that have to be done. It is very encouraging to me when Rodney talks about a streamlined app process if we get in the system right now. The non-streamlined app process is why the interest rates went up on us right now. So it could definitely be a benefit to being in the system and having this contact. Actually, I think this is one of the first times that someone in Rodney's position has actually come forward to the assembly and presented on a level like this. So I appreciate the face-to-face and getting to know the person behind the emails and everything. But at this point, the assembly, when we previously budgeted, we went forward with a certain amount of debt service. And right now, I'm leaning towards the idea of actually only advancing $3 million out of this loan so that we don't have to go back and increase our debt service load on our citizens. That $3 million still gives us the opportunity to continue to get some of the work done. It allows us to be open for some future grant funding if necessary. And even if the $4 million was there, so we signed the loan for the $4 million and instruct staff to only pull 3, that we're not accruing interest on that extra $1 million. And if staff needs that money, they can come back to us and say, hey guys, here's a really good reason why we need this extra money. So I'm kind of leaning back towards the 3 million. We're only, in my estimation, we're only at this $4 million number because interest rates went down. That's not the case today. So I'm kind of adjusting my thought pattern to keep us within the debt service previously budgeted.
Question, do we have to do anything different in that case then? I mean, since we don't have to pull all of it, I mean, do we need to change the resolution or can we leave it as is and vote on it and essentially tell city staff to only pull 3 million?
My estimation would be that it would stay the same. And that's something I was extremely trying hard to do. And so it's encouraging that we wouldn't pull interest. We wouldn't be charged interest on monies that we did not advance. Because I don't, John and Rodney and everybody have gone a long path on this, and I don't anticipate on changing it at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we should approve this because this resolution or this agreement is for the 4 million. Yeah, we can just agree for the 4 million and instruct staff to take out as little as possible or take it out when they need it.
John?
I appreciate those comments, and I think you're in the exact same spot I was a few weeks ago as I was laser focused on the cost of debt, the difference between the debt service when we first applied and the debt service now. But I've shifted my thinking more towards $3 million doesn't get us as far as $4 million does. And I know we can come back, but can I lay all these numbers out in front of you right now? No, I cannot. I'm willing to come back with them, but I'm willing to bet that inflationary construction costs are going to far exceed the extra debt service of that $1 million, meaning if the lack of that $1 million extends us further, I think the cost of construction will go up and be more expensive than that cost of extra debt would be.
I'm sorry, I want to add on to what you're saying. Inflation is compounding. This is simple interest on a loan, just if you're looking at it on a finance basis. So if you don't take the money at the 3.6 or 7% right now, inflation is at 6%. It compounds monthly to increase the cost of the materials and the things that you're purchasing and the work that you're going to have to do with the labor and so on. So when you can get a simple interest loan at 3.6 or 7% now, you're going to save yourself a lot of capital costs moving forward. So just as a insight on that, as far as the finance part goes.
Thanks, John. I had I thought what was very, very eloquently laid out, and you poked a good hole in that one. So, because you're not wrong. I appreciate that. Please.
Just one other consideration that I just want to make sure that we're being clear with. So regardless whether we were to borrow $1 million or $4 million, the reporting requirement, which is actually pretty labor intensive, and is going to cost money to do will be the same. So regardless, whether that's a 1 million or a 4 million loan, we're going to be doing all the same reporting. It's going to take a lot of man hours from the electric department as well as the finance department to do that reporting. So when we add that cost in, to me, it makes more sense to go full tilt.
Other discussion from the assembly? So I'm not 100% on board with where John's at with the 4 million as opposed to the 3. He's correct. I guess I just haven't mulled that one over quite as far, but this going through this process does give us the 4 million. I think John understands to only pull out as needed to try and reduce some of the costs of this loan. And I would just hope, for at least my sake, kind of a gentleman's agreement that as this money is started to expend, that we're just updated on it, and it keeps. We're just aware of this cost, because I really do think that we can keep including this in grant applications as we go forward.
Agreed.
There's one comment I can make on that.
Yes, please.
With the Inflation Reduction Act, hydro was included as renewable, which in the past, it has not always been included as renewable. And so when we talk about the 50-50 and some of the opportunities coming with the Inflation Reduction Act, we don't have all of the information. It's coming, but I would just say, however much you use in this loan and so on down the line, and being part of our programs will be a huge benefit for you to being able to have access to those funds as well. So moving forward, the hydro is included, along with some other things as far as renewable energy goes, that you might only end up paying somewhere between 30 and 40% of the total project costs with tax incentives and so on down the line. So there's some, moving forward, there's some, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's some good things coming out of that I think you guys might be able to tap into.
Yeah, I appreciate that outlook. I think we're about $150 million well aware that hydro was not previously considered green energy. We unfortunately went down that road at one point, and we're disappointed to learn that it was not considered renewable, even though we believe differently. But I really do appreciate your insights on this, Rodney. I think you're going to be a great partner for us going forward, and I hope to speak to you again. Anything else?
Yeah, guys, so much for your time. I really am grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. Anything else from the assembly? Sarah, on the resolution?
Okay, on the motion to approve resolution 2023-05 on first and final reading, Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item H.
I'll leave this one up to the assembly. We're about at the top of the hour. We have some reports and one item left. If the assembly would like to take a break, we can. Okay, we'll take a break and be seated when we're ready. Thank you, Asana. We were waiting, standing by for one more. All right, thank you, Assembly. So this next item is a discussion direction decision for consideration of property tax and utility expense exemption to the Sitka Historical Society per the terms of their lease in Centennial Hall. This was an item that was supposed to come back to us previously. However, the small thing, 2020 kind of reared up, and honestly, we lost track of it. So it is before us now, as per the original terms quite some time ago, for the Assembly to reconsider the property tax and utility expense exemption for the Sitka Historical Society, to see if that's still something that the Assembly is interested in providing. So John, you had some more on this item?
I think you hit most of it, Mayor. Just a couple points is I just want to reiterate that this is really procedural in nature. This is coming right out of the terms of the lease. I laid out the costs here of the exemptions that are granted now. Procedurally, the lease does say that the community purpose exemption for the property tax has to be done through an ordinance. So that decision can't necessarily be made tonight, but if you direct me to prepare that ordinance, that will come back for a two reading. Or it'll be a two reading ordinance. However, the utility payment exemption, if that is granted tonight, that can be done through motion. But that's the only additional items I had.
Thank you. So we do just have a discussion. Actually, Hal, do you have something you can add to the conversation at this point, or would you wait for specific questions? Because you're not going to get off easy tonight. Okay, great. So if the Assembly does have questions for the director of the Sitka Historical Society, he is here as well. Discussion? Hal, I'll go ahead and start out then, because I was one of the people who was on the Assembly when we started talking about this, and it was a new space. It was a larger space. We just really weren't sure how the museum was going to necessarily pay its bills. And so the goal was, let's give this a trial period. Let's come back and see if the Historical Society, through fees for service, people paying to get in, can cover its operational costs. So can you give me an update on some revenues, some expenses, and then some estimated revenues and expenses for next year?
I'm Hal Speckman, the Executive Director of the Sitka Historical Society and Museum. Thank you, Mayor Heisenbeis and the Assembly. One of the challenges that you have when you're in a nonprofit is to provide a service and provide it at a fiduciary level. The services that we provide save the city literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, because most cities have museums. And then with that comes city staff and all of the salaries and benefits that go along with it. The Historical Society for about 60 years has taken that onus off of the city to provide a place for the archives, photographs, and collections, in addition to programming and providing a cultural tourism destination for tourists. And so we have raised about $1 million in this community for the museum. That includes our collections, that includes our data management system and everything else, not just museum. So we're providing a very necessary and needed service to the community. When it comes down to dollars and cents, inflation catches us just like it does everybody else. It was 8.7% last year, or 2022. So all of the funds that Mr. Leach outlined would be taken up by inflation for us. We have been able to gain about $50,000 in admissions from tourists. That helps supplement our staffing, which includes a full-time curator, which is one thing the city has wanted, and a full-time director position, and a part-time summer visitation person. In addition, we have raised about, with all of our activities in the year, we raise about $50,000 through our 4th of July, Old Time 4th of July, our Brew Cruise, Alaska Day activities, Christmas Train, Toyland Model Village, and all the things that we do. And so we got a very active board and we fundraise. With this, it would probably create a bit of a hardship for us to provide the services that we provide. And I would be the first to say I'm a conservative person financially, but the city, quite frankly, is getting a pretty good deal with what we give to you, because you've got a 9-member board that says we're going to support the society, and the city's been very gracious in allowing this place to have it. But the museum, but at the same time, we're working with the city to put our best foot forward. And when I look at this, there's supposedly 500,000 tourists coming to town. Where are they going to go? You're going to need different entities in town that provide that. So I could go on the specifics of the money, but, it might not seem much to the city, but it's a lot to a society that, has to raise all of our funds other than what the city gives us for support.
I was trying to track that. I got some of the figures, but do you have last year's expenses and then revenues and then or then your anticipated expenses and revenues? What I'm trying to do here is to justify the need. Because if you tell me you have $2 million cash in the bank, I'm going to say you probably don't need it. However, if you tell me you're running a $500,000 deficit, I can more easily justify the need.
We have $142,000 in the bank. Our salaries will take that up in less than 2 years if we have to use that. That doesn't count operations. We don't keep a large deposit for those very reasons, but we had to spend $1 million just to get the museum. And so it pretty much broke the bank for the Historical Society. And we're trying to get in better financial shape, and that's what this does. So our goal is to have enough money to kind of be independent, but we're not quite there yet.
Other questions, or Kevin?
So, because this is more of a discussion item, would you be comfortable allowing us to take a look at your income statement and balance sheet?
Absolutely.
Okay. That would help. Because I agree, I think the mission is great and there's valid points. I would just agree with the mayor, though. I'd like to just have a little more information. So I don't know how that would work, but this is a discussion item. We don't have to do anything tonight, but it would be great if you could provide that for us.
You bet.
Thank you.
John?
I want to point out that I didn't bring up in the beginning. I want to point out 3 very specific things that that I did reach out to the Historical Society personally for help on, and I think these were important projects that they assisted us with in the city. When we celebrated our 50th anniversary, the Historical Society led the time capsule event, and I personally walked back there with some other folks and helped pick out items and put some of the items and commemorate the event. We reached out to Hal to have him help with the timeline, the storyboard that you now see on the second story of City Hall. I didn't even have to give many details. I just said, I want something like you see in the Smithsonian with a timeline and some artifacts along the timeline. And they put that together themselves at our request. And if you remember, they were they were instrumental with the Baranoff statue and making sure that that was put in an appropriate location. So there are times that that we do reach to the society and ask them for specific assistance.
Thank you for those reminders. And yes, my request for the financials is in no way saying I don't think you guys are doing a good job or contribute. I just would like more information.
We're the same as you. We have to be audited every year and, you know, we even have to file what's called a Form 990. So we have all that information.
Thanks, Hal.
Crystal?
So for those projects that you listed, what would you have done without reaching out and working together? Would you pay? Would you contract? Would you need a curator? Where does this fall? I know you mentioned those for a reason. I'm just curious if they weren't an arm's reach away, what would you have done?
We would have either paid somebody else to do it or directed our own city staff to take on those tasks.
And then this is a little bit for Stephen, just because you have the historical knowledge of the conversation that took place at the table. So I saw the meeting minutes and that was helpful overall. There was a reason that you guys put the 24 months in place. Is that sort of what you alluded to, is you guys really wanted to see how they would do in those first 2 years to see if it would be necessary moving forward? I didn't see a lot of depth behind that of why that conversation kind of shaped to, let's only do this for a 2-year period and then check back in. Is that what it was for?
Correct. Yeah, it was to my remembrance. I also reread the minutes, but my remembrance of the agreement was, we understand you're in a new space. There was a very large outlay, as Hal indicated, for them to get into the new space. Costs partially shared by the municipality, but we wanted them to get back on their feet after that. And we wanted to see what revenues were going to look like in a new space. And we wanted to give them a fighting chance. And this, you know, the extra about $20,000 on top of the $97,000 that they had already got. We wanted to give them just a little bit of help. However, we wanted to see if, you know, if this space turned into gangbuster, if we ended up having 500,000 visitors like we're coming, if it was still actually necessary for the success of the organization. And so that's why it was written in there to come back. I think that answers your question.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so financials will help us kind of figure out where they're at present. And then I think this is for John, the community purpose. We have that in code. Are there any other organizations that are benefiting from that?
I think right now, I can't list them all off the top of my head, but I think right now we have about 30 organizations in the city and borough that receive a community purpose exemption.
Okay. And then this outlines 2 that were specifically outlined as part of the meeting minutes, which was the utilities as well. But thinking back to the last budget meeting, there's also a $100,000 donation that's given on an annual basis. Is that correct? So we're looking at utilities, we're looking at taxes, and then we're looking at 100. Well, we're not looking at that, but that's also a means that we provide support to this group.
Correct. And
Okay.
also no rent.
And no rent. Okay, thank you.
And one thing, yeah, I will mention too, when I first got in the assembly, I approached Hal and he gave me a tour of the archives and all that stuff, for lack of a better word. It is very cool. It's very interesting. I had no idea we had this much history kind of saved and logged and all the tools that you have. It's quite a thing. So I would encourage other members, if you haven't had a chance, to set up a meeting and get a tour. I think it's great.
The thing that I would add is that I think the city's getting a pretty good deal from the Sitka Historical Society. And it's not often when you get a group of people dedicated for basically 60 years to provide a service to the city. And, you know, I think that this is just one way to kind of validate that. And we do need the money because you never know what's going to happen we don't make tons of money from things other than what we raise money for. We get some money from admissions, but it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, certainly. I think it was $46,000 last year.
What was it, $5 a head or something to come in?
$5 a head.
I was just trying to figure out how many people actually visited out of our, 350,000 or
Well,
so.
that's, and that's, those are paid admission. We let many in for tours and different things. And so if we charged every person that came in the door, we'd certainly make more, but that's, we're more about promoting the history and
Perfect
culture of
business
Sitka.
model. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I want this to be an enterprise fund that generates revenue now. I think you're on to something, Hal. That's why we hired you. Well, we didn't hire you, but that's why you've been hired. So an option tonight, I did hear a little bit of agreement that we would like to see a little bit more financial reporting from the Historical Society to justify the need. One option for that route tonight is to do nothing and then bring this item back in the future once we've seen those to satisfy any of our needs. There are some motions in the packet as well. If assembly members are comfortable going forward with either the rent or the utilities exemption or the property tax exemption at this time, but it is fairly open. If nothing is done at this time, we don't need a motion to table this or anything else. We'll simply bring it back at a future date. Tor?
Yeah, I just would say that if we did, at least on the property tax exemption, that takes 2 readings and we would get all the numbers we're talking about, I assume, when the ordinances were brought forth. And it doesn't actually do anything at this point, just brings it forward to us. So it might be a good route to get those numbers if we, if we so desire. And I was wondering if we wanted to roll them into the same thing. I mean, I know it doesn't have to be an ordinance to do the utilities exemption, but if we did them all at the same time, that way we would have all of the information in front of us at that point. Just a thought on a way to go forward.
Yeah, I think you're also correct there. And I'll just let you know personally, I'm more open to the property tax than I am to the utilities, depending on the situation, of course. But the property tax is easier for me. I'm trying to protect my electrical fund as much as possible and trying to get some revenue in there. So that would be a little bit more of a discussion and the discussion point, depending on the strength of the Historical Society at this point. Financial strength, not Hal's strength.
So if I had a preference, it would be to wait and put this to the next meeting. We have financials, take a look, and it'll probably be easy to make a decision on everything, but whatever people want to do here.
So do we need to make a motion to bring it up at the next meeting? Okay. I'd like to do that.
Does one meeting allow sufficient time for assembly members to review and reach out to Hal if necessary for clarification? I'm asking because I can put the item on the agenda. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Sarah, will you help remind me? I say that I can do it, but.
What kind of financials do you want?
Income statement from last year, balance statement as of December 31st. Any cash flow projections you have for next year or for this year, sorry. Off the top of my head.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate your time this evening. All right, is there anything else on item I before we move on? All right, this would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. I think the Assembly should transmit to the public the community purpose exemption list. I remember years ago when I was on the Assembly, we had that list because we were looking to review them, since many of the items, people on there like Braveheart and all these others were really organizations that that you can understand why the community exemption is. There were a lot of other organizations which I thought were questionable and could actually be a good tax base for the city. One of them had at least $100 million worth of property exemption. And I think that this needs to be, again, the public needs again to be reminded. And I'll be certain to put in a Freedom of Information Act to get a remembrance of that. As far as the Historical Society goes, it's $16,000 for utilities, and I presume that's a utility base, which is based not on their actual use, but a percentage of the HCH that they kind of carved out and they're being charged. My notion is turn off all the heaters and open the door and let the ambient temperature come in. I don't think that that would be a burden for the city. The property tax would be $5,600 on an assessed value of $933,000. Now, I just want you to think that in FY23, there's an item which gives the society $97,200, which I think is fantastic. And I think it should be kept up and maybe consider even giving more. But one important thing that people need to know is that how many historical organizations do we have in Sitka like this? We have Sheldon Jackson, but you have to walk to go there. Everybody in general who comes by the buses come in here and have the opportunity to get an introduction to Sitka. And I think that that is something that's very important. And I think that that needs to be supported. And I don't even think you need to think, with profit loss statements, Hal said it's $46,000 that people put in the thing. And if you go out there and look, it's a suggested donation. I'm sure there weren't any $10,000 checks. My notion is that they need to have the exemption and they need to not have to pay the utilities, since overall it's a shared utility. If nobody was there, you could, they would still be heated. Bottom line is, imagine what it would look like if they weren't there. And I think that's important. What would you put in, a t-shirt shop or a cafe or something idiotic like that? Go Sitka Historical Society. Thank you.
Is there anyone else under persons to be heard? Any item on or off tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move into reports. So just want to give a brief report from our government to government meeting last night. Most of the assembly was able to be there. Some others had some previous commitments. You missed a really, really good clam chowder. The layer of butter on top of it was extraordinary. So we do appreciate Sitka Tribe of Alaska for hosting that. They gave us a legislative priority list, some ways that they're looking for increased partnership between the municipality and Sitka Tribe. Talked about the new seal, which was on front of the annual report. So for those members who weren't able to make it, I'm sure we can get you an annual report from STA if need be. Gave us a list totaling about $1.3 million of donations that Sitka Tribe of Alaska has given to the community of Sitka over the last year. And I always like to see that chart because we know that the tribe has a massive impact in the municipality, but when you see the monetary value there of $1.3 million given out throughout the community, and this is things even youth activities scholarships. So when the wrestling team needs $500, they get $500. When the softball team needs it, they get that as well. Talked about a affordable housing summit that they're looking to co-host with the municipality, and then talked about a parking lot concern, and then some wayfinding projects, perhaps when we go down our wayfinding, that we can perhaps partner better on directing people towards the Nakahiti House, which I learned was almost completely sold out for next visitor year, which sounds amazing unless you have friends and family visiting. And I think you can reach out to Chairman and he might be able to bump you in on that one. The city did present a few things, including the 25th anniversary of our memorandum of understanding with the tribe. And I do believe that we'll be doing a celebration, a ceremony to commemorate that 25th anniversary here coming up in July. That is all I have for my report this evening. I took a lot of notes. I'm making sure. Of note, and this is going to be gradual, that the Sitka Tribe of Alaska's name is going to be changing. They're going to slowly phase, council has approved phasing in a name. So at some point, Sitka Tribe of Alaska will be properly known as Sitka Kwan. And talking with Lisa and tribal members, that'll be in phases. So it's not inappropriate to continue to refer to it as Sitka Tribe of Alaska at this time. John?
Thanks, Mayor. You covered the meeting from last night. I don't think I had the opportunity to present on Southeast Conference. Yeah, we didn't have a meeting since Southeast Conference to talk about some of the events there. Yeah, I'm tracking back the dates, and I think we were there during the assembly meeting, or maybe we missed one. I don't remember. But I also don't remember what I had for dinner yesterday. One of the important things that came out of Southeast Conference is broadband opportunities, and we brought that up at the government to government meeting last night. There's a lot of broadband opportunities out. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities out there right now with the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But they're laying fiber all over Southeast, and Tlingit and Haida has a grant right now, and they're working on broadband. But there's so much out there right now that I think we need to work together and share some information on ways we can leverage those broadband opportunities to bring more service into Sitka for even just a backup. But it's proven to be difficult over the past few years because just like the ferry service, we're on the outside and it's difficult to get things here. So there might be some opportunities available that we're going to pursue. That's all.
Brian?
I'm still without a legal assistant, 6 weeks and counting. Not a lot of applicants. Community can hear me now. Consider applying for the legal assistant job at the city and borough of Sitka. I'll be on leave starting the week of February 27th, and we'll be back in town the following Monday. So, and I will be available by email and phone in that particular trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, is it inappropriate to add boards, commissions, committees to your list and then hiring vacancies to the list of things that you say on your report all the time? That list might be lengthy, unfortunately. Yeah, please.
So Brian, because, you mentioned people listening. I think there's probably some people who, might be intimidated and think that, oh, a legal assistant, they have to be a paralegal. Do they, for the public who might be listening, do they have to be a paralegal or can they be trained up by you?
Don't have to be a paralegal.
Okay. All right.
Need office skills and
get
ready to work.
All right, great. So hopefully someone will apply. Thank you.
Any liaison representatives this evening? Tim?
Yeah, we didn't do these. I think this might be what you're talking about. We ended a meeting before finishing all these things. So I was attended the Police and Fire Commission, and they reorganized a little bit. So it's still the same chair, but they changed the vice chair to Lloyd Platson. They spent some time on the APVs, and there's only 44 registered APVs currently in Sitka. And they were asked by the assembly to review this particular ordinance as I think it's a 1 year or 18-month situation. And so, but so they could have just stopped, but they decided that they're going to wait 1 more year and review it 1 more time because this summer it looks like there's a lot of vendors who are potentially going to bring APVs into the system. And so we kind of want to see what the visitor impact of the APV ordinance might be. And so I think that was something for us to keep an eye on as well. Talked about the police labor shortages. And in terms of, I think this is a constant sort of thing. And then we spent the most time, I think, on the American Street reconfiguration. So American Street during the closure was turned into a one-way, and all the people on the street would like it to be a two-way again. And so the commission is, I don't know if they've presented that to anybody yet, but they would like it to go back to its original configuration. So they spent 2 meetings on that. The last meeting was the second meeting, and that is their recommendation to even when the street's closed, for it to be a two-way. So, because they don't have any evidence according to what they were talking about for why we should leave it as one way. Should you?
As liaison to Historic Preservation Commission, we discussed last week, or I listened as it was discussed, the community member interested in creating Catlean as a historic district. And the commission is drafting a letter resolution to support that as a district.
Crystal?
I'll start with Parks and Rec. They met today and they approved 3 commercial use permit applications. Then as part of their meeting, they reappointed James Polson as chair. They held off on vice chair because they only had 4 members there today, and they knew they would be, we would potentially be appointing somebody else to the commission. So they'll take that back up at the next meeting. And then after Catherine's appointment tonight, they have 1 vacant position that they need to fill. So just a reminder that that is a noon meeting 1 time per month on the second Tuesday. If anybody is interested, they could use another person to make sure that quorum is reached. Library Commission, huge. So we just did the proclamation. They have a number of events that they've been planning. So I'm going to list off the ones that have been finalized. As the library director mentioned, April 1st, they're going to celebrate their 100th anniversary at basically shared between Harrigan Centennial Hall and the public library. They're going to have a ton of events, an art show, music by the Breakwater Blues Band and friends. They're going to have food carts, craft tables, and a lot more. That'll be between the hours of 1 and 4 o'clock. And then the next week on April 8th, they're going to have a past and present tour of the former library sites in Sitka. And then April 20th, the Sitka Friends of the Library, as well as the Sitka Public Library, they are going to co-host a library pub quiz. So those will be teams of 3 who will answer trivia questions on books, authors, libraries, media, and things specific to the public library. So they'll have prizes and awards as part of that event, and I am the hostess, so that should be interesting. They have 2 more events that are in the planning stages. And so if you want to stay up to date, they do have a Facebook page, and then you can always drop into the library and just have a conversation. Those are underway. They should be, they should have dates to be determined to happen during the celebratory next couple of months. They're pretty excited about the 100th anniversary. The next commission, LEPC, I had to fill in for that one. So this meeting, they actually had a change in secretary. Chris Turner, he was their secretary. He transitioned as an engineer. And so Carl was there to take notes and try his hand at secretary for the first time. So they were excited about the promotion of Chris. And then just a couple of notes. So the noteworthy, if you've seen the hazmat trailer parked near the fire hall, they wanted to note that they're just servicing the truck. It's not related to any sort of incident. And then under new business, Chief Warren, he mentioned an intention to review and update their emergency operation plans. And so at this meeting in particular, they decided to start with oil and hazardous substances. When it comes to vacancies, in February, they have one position that needs to be filled. That's a category 4. And then in March, they have 3 positions. Those come from category 2, 4, and 6. And just a reminder, so category 4 is a representative from community groups, and then 6 is a member of the public. So if anybody's interested in being involved with emergency planning, that's an option over the next couple of months. Just keep your eye out for that. And then the last one is Health Needs and Human Services Commission. Want to thank Doug for his 8 years of service on that, which we did earlier. I just want to emphasize how great he's been on that commission. Have to also emphasize that they have 4 vacancies that need to be filled. They've been unable to make quorum just because of so many transitions. It's a great commitment. It's 1 time per month, the 3rd Wednesday, and that is a noon meeting. And they're supposed to meet tomorrow, but again, we don't have quorum, so we can't do that. So right now we have 3 strong members and we're looking to add to the community. So if you're interested in Health Needs, Human Services, see Sarah. That's all I have.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week I attended a special board meeting for the school board where they discussed and accepted the resignation of School Superintendent Frank Hauser. His last day will be June 30th. At the meeting, they also discussed the possibility of, the transition, whether to try to get an interim superintendent or just start a search for a long-term one or a combination thereof. I believe it's tomorrow at 5 at the school district office. There is another meeting to discuss. No, I'm sorry. I think it might be Thursday. Thursday. I apologize. And that'll be actually at the school district office, and that they will be discussing the process of getting whether they want to get an interim or basically continuing that discussion with a little more detail. So that's an important decision to make, and
Any other liaison representatives? I guess I can only look this way because they've already. Sarah?
All right, so upcoming meetings, we have a special budget meeting on Thursday, February 23rd on the enterprise funds. We have a regular meeting Tuesday, February 28th, and then another meeting that week. It's a special budget meeting on the draft general fund. That's March 2nd. Lots of meetings coming up.
Any vacancies?
Yes, and then a long list of vacancies, in particular health needs, Parks and Rec, Library Commission, and Tree and Landscape and Animal Hearing Board.
Perfect, thank you. Any other reports this evening? Kevin?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Friday, I requested from the John Police Department that I could go on a ride along. I've been meaning to do this for a long time. It's where you sit with the police officer while they go and do patrol, sorry. I thought I did it for about 4 hours, was with 2 different officers because we had one and then they did a shift change. I intend on doing another one in the summer when it's busier. It was a very eye-opening experience, and I was very pleased by the officers and their demeanor and how they operated, and spent some time in dispatch. It was very informative, and I believe that the police, I've always have, but the police form a very crucial part of any community. And I think that if there's any young people out there who are interested, they think the police department, they would just approach them and they'd be more than willing to talk about opportunities. There's definitely several vacancies for jobs at the police department. So if anyone's interested, contact the police chief, I guess the chief, or just go to the office there. Thank you.
Any other reports? Further, other reports? How long do you want to stay? Sarah's going to put the timer on us real quick if we don't. There is no executive session tonight, so that brings us to adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.